Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Beyond the Album Cover with yours truly, Jarrell Mason, or better known as Jay Mace, where we get to scoop with people inside and outside of the entertainment industry and give them their flowers while they're here to be celebrated. Back again, if you listen to part one of my interview with this young man, it complements his journey from WAG, the 102 Jams, to where he is now as lead sports anchor for WRL, the Big Five in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. That's the triangle. So shout out to NC. And he's going to talk about his new podcast, Culture State, which just dropped this past Wednesday, along with everything else in between. My good friend, brother from another mother, Chris Lee, or as I like to call him, the artist formerly known as Show Smooth. What's going on, Chris?
Jay Mace, yeah, this dude is the first dude to show me how to work a radio board. So yeah, it's always good. Whenever you need me, I'm definitely happy to come on. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, man. It's definitely good to have you on. And like I was stating earlier, I was just interviewing one of our former WAG members, DJ Press, which will drop this upcoming Sunday. And he's just wanted to tell you how proud he is of you and your journey and what you're doing at WRAL. So everybody at WAG is definitely proud of what you're doing and breaking down barriers, bro, down at Capital
For,
Broadcast and WRAL.
for sure, that was a start. So yeah, happy that WUAG was there. I keep telling people, I've told students from A&T this: if you want to get on, and if you want that hands-on experience, go to WAG, and it's an open format there. If you want to get that hands-on experience, because a lot of students can go 4 years in A&T and never touch WNAA because of how WNAA runs. There's nothing against WNAA. It's legendary. You know what I'm saying? But they have a stricter format there. And yeah, if there's any students that happen to be from Greensboro, whether you're at Guilford College, Greensboro College, whatever, you want to be in radio, learn how to work that board. As far as I know, WAG still has that open format. So if you're from the outside, you can get a slot and you can get that hands-on experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely get your reps up. And by the time you get your reps up, you'll be like my man Show Smooth in the next 10 to 15 years. You never know. And your podcast, Culture State, which just dropped this past Wednesday, it talks
Mm-hmm.
about the things and people that make NC what it is. And how did that come about?
So one of the things that drew me to WRL as I was, kind of job searching at the end of 2019, was the fact that they had a podcast network, but they weren't sure exactly what to do with it. And so I was like, oh shoot, I've been wanting to get in podcasting. I felt like I could have good content. I just wanted the machine behind it to kind of push it, because it's kind of tough, I'm sure, as you know, to do the content and to do the marketing
Yeah,
for a
it's a lot when you're
podcast.
a one man band.
That is, man, that's a lot of work right there. And you're editing all this yourself and all that. So, I wanted to get into it. I started March 4th, March 12th of 2020 is when, everything kind of shut down, and the pandemic really started affecting everything. So a lot of things were put on hold. My co-host for Culture State, his name is Dennis Cox. I was about to say Dennis Smith Jr. I'm thinking about basketball. His name is Dennis Cox. He works at one of the radio stations that WRL owns, 99.9 The Fan in Raleigh. And so he was there part time. His story kind of reminds me of my story. He was there part time, and then in March, he got his chance to be full time finally. So he wanted to do a podcast as well. He was a wrestling fan. He saw that I used to be a pro wrestler. And so at first he, came at me like, hey, we should do a wrestling podcast. And I wasn't that interested in doing a wrestling podcast because there's so many. And it's hard to differentiate yourself in that space to me. But we just started having a conversation. I loved how, we vibe together. And we had never met each other. We literally just met each other this year in 2021. But we had been talking since May 2020 about working together. And so then we finally, we started having conversations about the greatness of that's coming out of North Carolina, and a lot of stories that people just don't know because there's not anything there for that. And so we were just like, yeah, let's do that. And so that's how Culture State was born. And the crazy part is, if you listen to the first few episodes, with Shane Helms, with Petey Pablo. Josh Howard is coming up. Interview with B Dot from 102 Jams is coming up. All of those were recorded in either September or October of 2020. The election of 2020 had WRL push things back, and so now we're just launching in January, and these episodes actually are like 4 months old. And so, but luckily they still, have legs. They wanted to make sure that we weren't overshadowed and, with our launch and all that. So now we have the freedom to come out there, and, it's different than anything that WRL's put out on the Capital Broadcasting podcasting network platform. Usually what they put out is snippets from the news or snippets from radio shows, and they put it together and call it a podcast. This is legit something that just lives on the podcast world. Culture State isn't, you can't see it on television. You can't hear it on the radio. We hope that it does go to those places at some point, but we want the podcast to be first and then go to the television, then go to radio. So that way people will come to the podcast and it's something unique. So I'm happy to help, Capital Broadcasting, when it comes to building this podcast network. Happy to do something new, there, and because nobody else has their own podcast, on the television side. So I'm happy that I get a chance to break some barriers.
Yeah, it's definitely unique because, like you stated, some podcasts, they just recycle the audio from the TV feed, plaster it onto the podcast network, and there it is with a podcast. But you have some that do that, but they also have exclusive podcast content, like with Jalen Jacoby, where they take the TV audio feed and then Tuesdays and Thursdays do podcast only exclusives. And like you said, it's definitely hard to differentiate yourself because the middleman is cut out, and pretty much if you have a Wi-Fi connection, a mic, and a voice, anybody can do a podcast. Whereas you and I, we both cut our teeth getting it out the mud.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to really do something where you create a niche. And I would say, kudos to you because you've pretty much had a very similar niche since you started. I mean, there's like a few things that you've tweaked here and there, but since you started, you've pretty much had that niche, like that whole, first off the history of radio and media. You're deep into that, but then also just, heavy into what was happening in the 80s and the 90s and how that kind of, set the foundation for where we are today. That's always been a huge niche of yours. And I think going back, one of the things that I did in college, of course, Carolina Crunk, doing the show about North Carolina hip hop and R&B, I was just kind of thinking, what else can I do to highlight the state of North Carolina? And simply put, when you look at it, I just kept looking at basketball games where it's like, man, this dude is from, Havelock, and this dude on the other team, he's from Durham. Or, looking at another basketball game and like, dang, this dude is from Greensboro, and then that dude is from Little Washington. And so, it was just like, all right, there's a lot more out there. And then flipping over to a Carolina Hurricanes game and they score a goal, and then you hear North Carolina, come on and raise up. And then, so it's just all that stuff. And it's like, all right, man, we got to do something for the folks in North Carolina and really pump up, what this state is and what it offers the mainstream.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I felt for the longest time our state was overlooked in the big scope of things from New York, LA, Atlanta, even Virginia. And I kind of felt those hip hop success out in those states kind of overshadowed what North Carolina was doing, with Little Brother and everything that was coming out after that. So it's definitely good now to see J. Cole, Rhapsody, The Baby, Stunning for Vegas, Luke Nasty, everybody out of NC just coming out and just doing their thing and putting on for the Tar Heel State.
For sure. A lot of great artists coming out of here, for sure.
Right. And take it back to the Carolina Crunk days. T Weezy that used to come to the studio with Gav Beats. Is that the same T Weezy that's background singer for Anthony Hamilton with the Hamiltons?
You know what? It might be.
Yeah, because I was looking at
I don't think I ever put two and two together. I think so.
Yeah, because I was looking, I was like, that dude look familiar. I was like, isn't that T Weezy that used to come to the studio with Gab Beats, the dude Carolina Crump? So it's crazy to kind of see that direct correlation. Then also with the 85 South show, with Carlos Miller, DC Young Fly, and Chico Bean. I believe Chico and B Dot was starting at the same time doing the comedy club circuit in and around Greensboro before they both got on Wild 'N Out.
That's and Chico Bean is also one of the people I had in mind. That's somebody I would love to interview because he's from DC and that's who he is, that's where he's from. But how he got his start was North Carolina. He becomes Chico Bean because of how he was able to navigate the comedy scene in North Carolina. And so yeah, man, I think about stuff like that. He came down to Winston-Salem State, pretty much stayed in the area. And I met Chico Bean in 2009. And that's when he was just Anthony Bean. Chico Bean came about because B-Dot told him, you need to get on Twitter. And he was like, all right. So he just chose the name Chico Bean just to see, what was, because, his family called him Chico or whatever. And, but as a comedian, he was going by his real name, Anthony Bean. And once he started getting notoriety, people started calling him Chico based off of, what they saw on Twitter. So he was like, all right, I'll go by Chico Bean, and, ends up making it to Wild 'N Out, and that's what it is. And so he's a great story. And those are the stories I want to highlight. His story, I want to eventually talk to Darren Brand. I mean, there's so many people, I could probably make a list of 52 people, and that's an entire year. There's so many people that we want to end up talking to and people that we're going to talk to. A young lady by the name of Amber Nichols, who is the second she's the second female GM in the G League. And she's a Black woman from Raleigh, North Carolina, only, I think, 28 years old. And she's the GM of the Capital City Go-Go. That's huge because when you think about the future of the front office in the NBA, in the WNBA, now you have Black women who are in the pipeline to come in and succeed. And so now she's going to, learn what it takes to be a GM on the G League side. And then maybe, in a few years, you're going to hear her, being a GM in the NBA. Her cousin is John Wall. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people know that name. That'll be also a great person to talk to for Culture State that we're going to try to end up talking to at some point. So her episode is coming up soon. One of my friends, I don't even know if you remember meeting her, but you met her back in college, J Mace, Jennifer King,
Name
who
rings
is
the
the
bell.
first Black female, full-time coach in the NFL. She works for the Washington football team. She was at Guilford College while we were at UNCG. And one of her good friends was Jada Monica Drew and also Natasha Lake. And she was always on campus. And so, Jennifer King was coming up in college basketball on the women's side while we were doing our thing at UNCG on radio. And so, I remember her grind. I remember her getting into coaching in women's basketball. I remember her playing in women's football leagues, making it happen and winning national championships and things like that. And then all of a sudden, right time, right place, right opportunity. She had been cutting her teeth in the football world on the women's side. Then Ron Rivera discovers her. It's like, oh, you're next door to us. Why don't you come in for an internship? And that's how it all starts. And now she's followed Ron Rivera up to Washington to get her first job in the NFL. She's had other pro jobs before. She worked with the AAF in the Arizona Hot Shots, back when the AAF was a thing a few years ago. But it's great to hear those and to have those types of stories and put real faces and real struggles behind it. And I think that's what Culture State is all about.
Yeah, definitely that, because I believe Jennifer King is from Reedsville. And then also, I didn't know this until recent that Jada Drew and we both grew up in the same hometown, Northampton County, 252 area. She went to Northampton East and I went to Northampton West, and it's crazy to see how now in terms of basketball that Eastern North Carolina is really starting to catch on with the NBA. Of course, you know, everything that came out of Kinston since Cedric Cornbread, Maxwell, Jerry Stackhouse, Reggie Bullock, B.I., Montrezl Harrell with the Lakers, and then, of course, Little Washington from Dominique Wilkins with the current most improved player, Bam Adebayo. And it's a great time to just be from NC right now, and then with the basketball tradition, you know, in Goldsboro with Kobe White, and then, of course, NFL Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everything that you just said right there, those are all, episode ideas that me and Dennis have come up with. And the interesting thing is too, my co-host Dennis, he's from Virginia. You know, he's a transplant. And so and I thought that was important too, because that's also a big story of what makes North Carolina great. There's a lot of people who, you know, can't say that they grew up here. Their early childhood memories aren't North Carolina. But as an adult, they get here, and then they find success, whether they went to school here, whether they just decided to come here and move and get a job. And then all of a sudden they find success. And we talked about that earlier with Chico Bean. And that is the story of my co-host, Dennis Cox. And so those are also stories that we want to highlight. Is just not only, you know, we don't want to just interview people who were, you know, born here. You can, you know, have come here and lived and all of a sudden found success, and people don't think about those types of stories, but those stories are also very important. You think about somebody like, Marion Jones from UNC, Olympic athlete, you know, ends up doing amazing, but she came to UNC and that's the thing. She's not originally from North Carolina. So it's a lot of different stories like that. Happy to highlight all of those as much as we possibly can, because we want this thing to really grow.
Right. And I was thinking about with Culture State, just the impact that NC has had in music, not in hip hop, but the whole scene in general. Because, you know, Clarence Avant, founder of Success and Taboo Records, is from Climax, which is outside of Greensboro. Then, of course, everything that came out of the Triad area, you know, with Fantasia. And then we go down to the 704, you know, Jodeci, and just how they were able to really come on and put NC on the map music wise. Then, of course, the hip hop history of the Triad with the Busy Boys, and how it was the launching ground for Ski Beats.
Yeah, Ski Beats from Greensboro. So, you know, a lot of people, when they think about, you know, famous record producers, you got to think about Ski Beats, because Ski Beats really put it on for North Carolina, and, you know, helped Jay-Z get, you know, a classic album, you know, Reasonable Doubt. And he was one of the producers on there. So, yeah, definitely Ski Beats is somebody I would want to talk to as well, for sure.
Yeah, that'll definitely be dope. And somebody on Facebook the other day had posted The Day by The Point featuring Jay-Z, and I was like, man, I had not heard that joint since your show, man. Because I remember, when you first played that record, I was like, man, that was such a dope record. And then the Brandon D record that sampled Billy Joel's Moving Out, that was a dope record too. And I thought that record would have broke big had circumstances would have been different as far as NC being looked at on a national scale. And this was, of course, when social media was still in its infancy.
You know, I got a story about the day. So that song, I think, was on 102 Jams, maybe in 2003, maybe 2002 ish. And I was a junior. I was either a sophomore or a junior in high school. And then my senior year starts in high school, and I meet this young lady, and we ended up, you know, talking and start dating. And so I was asking her about her parents, and she said, well, my mom does this, and my stepdad, he's a singer. And I was like, oh, okay, what does he do? Like, oh, he's with the band. It's called The Point. I was like, the day, ever since the day you've been going with Jay-Z? And she was like, yeah, that's my stepdad. It's like, what? And so it was at that time, it was just a regional song. And I wanted to know more about North Carolina artists, because, you know, even though the internet, of course, was around, everybody didn't have, you know, a profile that you could go to and follow them and see what they're up to or whatever. You know, it wasn't like that at that time. There wasn't a Twitter, there wasn't Facebook at the time to where people could, you know, follow and give updates on their career and things like that. And so end up going to meet him. And at that point, the group had already pretty much started to break up, but he was going to do his own thing. And his name is Mr. Rucker. And you know that I had all kinds of, Mr. Rucker, tracks on Carolina Crunk. And you may have even played a couple on your show.
Yeah, I remember the Shacking Up record.
Yeah. And so it was, it's all kinds of, and I think that was one of the things that kind of helped get that idea out there when I was young. Like, man, like we need that promotion because, I don't, and PD Pablo will actually say this, something similar when he comes up on our show. He was tired of North Carolina being looked at the place that you just pass through and pass over to get to DC or to get to Atlanta or whatever. There's real talent here. There's real talent here that could change the game in so many different ways. And so, I'm always happy to try to be that medium to have people, learn something about, the state. And, while you were talking, I was looking up something too. I want you to, do you have your phone on you?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
All right. Open up Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to put you on to somebody. Maybe you already know because, Jay Mace knows everybody, but maybe you already know.
I ain't that connected like you though, but I may know who you're talking about.
I want you to type in the search, Ash Nico, ASHNIKKO.
Okay. Can you spell it again for me?
ASHNIKKO.
Okay. All right. Let's see what we're talking about here. Like, I'll probably be surprised. Like, it's a mystery bag. Like, you never know who you're gonna see, who you're gonna find out. So while that's being found out, it's coming up right now. And while that's loading up, you mentioned 99 The Fan earlier, and I believe that was the station where Bomani Jones got his start before going on ESPN and doing his thing with The Right Time and the Evening Jones on 99 The Fan.
I'm not sure which radio station it was, but that is another example of somebody who's not from North Carolina, comes to North Carolina, makes their name, and and then starts popping off. So he's definitely somebody we would want to talk to. All right, what do you see when you look that up?
I'm seeing like pictures of a girl with blue hair eating a sandwich or something like that. Is that the right one?
Yep. All right. So Ash Nico is going to be basically the reincarnation of Lady Gaga. Okay. She is from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay. Word.
And so that's one of those types of people where it's like, Warner Brothers is going hard behind her. They're starting to really push her, and you're gonna see a lot more of her. And I remember just seeing people talk about like, man, this girl's crazy. So I just happened just to look at her, and her profile was like, this looks nuts. And then I just happened to do a quick Google search, and she's from Greensboro. And it was like, wow, like this girl could have been listening to 102 Jams growing up, but hearing me and doing all this crazy stuff. And now she lives in London, but Warner Brothers is really pushing her, and she's people are looking at her as like a potential next star, a breakout person in 2021. North Carolina is packed, man.
Yeah, that's definitely dope because I just recently interviewed for the podcast Kevin E. Taylor. He was formerly at BET and is a pastor at Unity Fellowship out in New Jersey. He's from DC, but actually went to Guilford College.
Nice.
So that's
Guilford College is
Yeah, because I didn't really go to Guilford too much, except for shout out to our boy AV when he was doing his show on QFS, and it was almost like Guilford, UNCG, A&T. They were all, even though they were in Greensboro, it felt like their own little worlds, and not too many times you would see a lot of schools cross-pollinate except for certain times in the year, because of course, when Jiho pops off, everybody from our neck of the woods go up the street to A&T and try to pretend they were like at A&T for a day.
Yeah, shout out to AV, shout out to Nick D, all those people that was over at QFS too, man. Like, yeah, it was a dope little time back in the day for sure.
Yeah, that definitely a dope time where everybody was getting it in and just getting on their grind. Now, since you've been in the triangle for a little bit, can you tell me the difference in the sports fandom between the triangle and the triad since you're in the hotbed of the blue bloods with Carolina, Duke, NC State?
I haven't had a chance to actually go to games, so I'm sure it's going to be different when I go there and able to meet more fans in person. But I do feel like, as far as sports fandom, the sports fans here in the Triangle, I would have thought North Carolina is just North Carolina, but I'm learning now that different sides and sections of North Carolina is very different from each other. And so the people here in the Triangle, they are a lot more vocal, my man. Especially NC State fans. They are some of the most vocal fans that you will ever come across, and it's crazy. But it's that passion behind it is amazing, and so you just try to lean into that as much as possible. Since they are very passionate, then they will like small things about it. So the other day I did a story. A lot of people won't do something like this, but other day I did a story on an NC State commit. It's been a tough week for NC State fans. They lost their number one scorer to an ACL injury, out for the season, Devin Daniels. And so it's like, okay, well, instead of harping on that, let's look at the future, NC State fans. You've got this young kid coming in from Reidsville, North Carolina, who started off his senior year in high school with a 44-point game. Not only that, his first 5 games of the season, he's averaging 35 points. His name is Breon Pass, and he's amazing at what he does. And so I did an interview with him, put out his story, and it was well received because people like to see stuff like that. And so I think that's what I like about this area. There is so much with NC State, Carolina, Duke, and then you have of course the Hurricanes that are there, and also the North Carolina Courage, which is the National Women's Soccer League. So it's the biggest women's professional soccer league in the United States, and a lot of their players play on the U.S. women's national team soccer team. That's here, and it's right here in Cary, North Carolina. And Naomi Osaka, just tennis star, just invested in the NC Courage, so she's one of the co-owners of the Courage. And so I think it's amazing to have those types of stories and all that. And there's a lot of rabid fans around here. So I would say that the Triad is a little bit more laid back. People are passionate about North Carolina, NC State, Duke, of course. But they're a little bit more laid back. In the Triangle, they are a lot more rabid, I think, and when it comes down to how their sports fandom goes.
Yeah, because I think NC State, why they're more vocal is because they've always been in the shadow of Duke and Carolina, and of course they haven't won a title since '83 when they beat University of Houston 5-slamma-jamma down here in Albuquerque at the Pit. And it's definitely just a big thing when you're in such a college basketball sports heavy area. And then another person that's killing the music game right now on the country tip is my man Luke Combs from Charlotte, went to App State, and he's, I believe, one of the youngest members to actually get inducted into the Grand Ole Opry, because it's a big deal once you get that invite from the members to say, hey, come on and join the Opry. But he's killing the country game right now.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of greatness around here, for sure.
Yeah, definitely that. And speaking of greatness, do you remember the first time that you saw Steph Curry at Davidson? Because I can remember when it was one game where he played us in Fleming Gym.
Yeah.
He looked like a itty bitty boy, no facial hair, no nothing. And I was seeing him shoot those deep threes. I was like, okay, he's going to be in the NBA, maybe as a role player or whatever. But never did I think that he would be the level where he's at now.
Were we sitting next to each other during that game?
I believe
so. Because I was definitely there at that game.
I believe so, because I remember that game because it snowed afterward when we was walking back to our dorm.
So that game, it was Steph Curry's freshman year. He was at Fleming Gym. Of course, UNCG was hot that year, and I think it may have been our junior year. And that was the year where it was like, all right, this is the time for Kyle Hines. And
was Ricky Hickman on that squad?
Ricky Hickman, he was a senior that year. Dwayne Johnson, not The Rock, but Dwayne Johnson, and Kevin Alexiak. That was the year for them to really start, coming up. Most of them were juniors. Ricky Hickman was a senior, and they were looked at as like, this is their time to potentially win the SoCon. and try to make that NCAA tournament. And man, we started looking at the roster, and it said Curry. And then I remember somebody tapped me and said, "That's Del Curry right there." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. That's his son." Oh, okay. And so and then I was like, if that's his mom is fine. And then that was his mom, and his mom is fine.
Yes. Mama Curry, shout out to you.
we were literally the section over from Del Curry. So it was like you had the Davidson bench, the parents behind the Davidson bench, and then the section over to their right was the student section, was where the Blue Crew was sitting. And that's where I was at. And so we were just looking at it. And I don't know if you remember that game, but UNCG was killing Davidson the first half. I mean, Steph Curry did look like a little boy. He looked like he was like 12 years old, legit on the court. And we're just like, who is this little boy? Oh, it's Curry. Is that your son? We're killing your son right now. Go back to Charlotte. Y'all can't do nothing here. And then I think at the halftime, UNCG had like a 15-point lead. And Davidson had always killed in the SoCon. So we're like, all right, we're about to get this win right here. We're better than Davidson because Davidson would always smack us. Second half was a completely different game. And Steph Curry turned it on, and he was hitting everything. And I had never seen anything like it in my life. And it was so mind-blowing because it felt like every he took was going in and you knew it. And it was like, oh my God, he shot it again. Oh, I got on. And then the game completely flipped. I think UNCG only scored like 18 in the second half, and or something like that, maybe 18 or 20. And Steph ended up with 40 points in that game, and his first game at UNCG, and Davidson ended up beating us by like 25. And so it was very humbling. It was very, very humbling because you couldn't have told me we weren't going to smack them at halftime. And that was the first time I saw Steph Curry play basketball, and I became a Steph Curry fan from that day. I was like, I like this dude. Yeah, I'm going to follow him.
Yeah, everybody became a witness that day, and I think it was the season when they made their Elite Eight run when they lost to Kansas.
That wasn't the season. It was the season. It was the next season.
When they made
this was his freshman year.
Okay.
Yeah, this was his freshman year, but the next year, that's when they made that Elite Eight run.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, that was. But but once they had that game, that's when people were like, yeah, we have to go to this game now. And so the next year, people made sure they were inside of Fleming for that game, because it was like, Steph, you got to go watch Steph. He's definitely must see TV.
Yeah, box office, and as you see, he's definitely the face of the NBA, and him and Patrick Mahomes, they got that Super Saiyan energy, that ultimate level 5 where they could just come back from 28-3 and just do their thing. And I think that Mahomes is going to prevent TB12 from getting another ring next Sunday. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. Now, to go back to UNCG basketball for a minute, our freshman sophomore year, I believe Fran McCaffrey was the men's basketball coach, current coach at Iowa. And just to see what he's doing now at Iowa, and to know that we got to see that up close firsthand freshman sophomore year at G.
Yeah, and Fred McCaffrey, shout outs to him, shout outs to Kyle Hines. They were the first interviews I ever did on radio. And so that was something, like, when I look back at it, Kyle Hines is tabbed as the most successful American player in Euro Basketball League history. He's won, I think, 4 championships. He has a bunch of wins in the Euro League, made all kinds of money. My man is doing it over there, and he was our year at UNCG. Came in the same year that we did, graduated the same year that we did, and it was always, you never forget who helped you out. And so, like, when it's like, all right, when I wanted to get in radio, I remember me and you talking in BCN 101, and you telling me what to do. And then I came and shadowed you at your show. You were showing me how to, do the board. You remember that. And then when I finally started, figuring out what I wanted to do, and, I was like, let me interview some people from the basketball team. And I asked for head coach. I asked for Kyle Hines. They gave it to me. And so they walked over to the radio station together. And, I interviewed Fran McCaffrey, who's doing his thing with Iowa right now, and Kyle Hines, who's currently the most decorated player in Euro basketball, American player in Euro Basketball League history. So it's amazing to think where we came from in those humble beginnings. And we just fast forward a few years. It's like, wow, like we're talking to some superstars, and we were superstars in the making. So
Yeah. And since you grew up in the Triad area, did you have any early memories of seeing CP3 play in high school before he went to Wake Forest?
I didn't see him in high school, but I did hear a lot about him. He was the star point guard who was the same year. Chris Paul is a year older than me, so he was a class of 2003. The star point guard at my high school, Southwest Guilford, was class 2003 as well. His name is Landon Quick. So in the area, it was like, oh, who's the best point guard? Like everybody knew that Chris Paul had, the highest ratings and more people were talking about him. But it was like, yo, people were like, yo, I don't know, Landon could probably get him. So at one point, I think Southwest played West Forsyth in the Frank Spencer holiday tournament. And it was the chance for Landon to really show like, okay, I can do it. And Chris Paul, I wasn't there, but from people who watched it, people said Chris Paul ate him up. And so it showed him. But Landon did his thing though. He went on to play at High Point, so he's definitely a Division I player. But Chris Paul was just on another level, as we see, because my man is 35 and still killing in the NBA like he's 22. So
Right.
shout outs to Chris Paul.
Yeah, because I can remember I didn't know who Chris Paul was until ESPN did the piece about, when his grandfather was killed and how he dropped the beat with 63 points in memory of his granddad. Because you got to think about it, at the time, even though I'm in northeastern North Carolina, we didn't hear about what else was going on the other side of the state from the Triangle West. So it was almost like, okay, I hear that Greensboro got this top guy. Okay, well, I hear that Raleigh and Durham have this top player here, and it was really the size of the state didn't really meet until you played in maybe like a big holiday tournament where they invited teams from all over the state to show who's best.
Interesting story about when Chris Paul dropped that 61. So the video that you've always seen from ESPN about that was shot by WXI, which was my former station. And so, shout outs to WXI for that. There's one of my coworkers there. His name is Warwick. I love Warwick's story. Warwick started off as a janitor at WXI, and everybody loved him or whatever. And he was like, I want to know what it takes to, work to help this whole machine run on TV. And so they were teaching him how to shoot. They were teaching him how to edit video and all that. And so that night, I think it was West Forsyth versus Parkland. And that's always usually a big game in Winston-Salem. And so they showed Warwick how to shoot video a little bit. And they were like, go get this game. There's this kid named Chris Paul. He's number 3 at West Forsyth. Try to get, stuff from him and see what happens. And he was there for the entire game. And then that happened to be the most historic game in West Forsyth history, where he dropped the 61. And Warwick was like, there's times where he's about to leave, but he was like, Chris just kept scoring and kept scoring. And then he got that last shot, and where, Chris purposely missed the free throw, throws out of bounds, walks off and starts crying. And his dad is holding him and all that, and he's able to get those shots. And that was my man Warwick that worked at WXI. Started off as a janitor, wasn't even supposed to be, shooting in that game, and it was the only TV camera that was there that day. And so that's the footage that you always see on ESPN that was shot by my man Warwick at WXI. So I always love those types of stories.
Wow. And you mentioned in the first episode of Culture State, you interviewed Shane Hurricane Helms, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how wrestled against The Rock, and how North Carolina, as we mentioned when I had you on a couple months back, how WRAL played a crucial role in professional wrestling, with some of the wrestling being taped at WRAL studios, Jim Crockett Promotions, and then with the McMahons, Vince being from Fayetteville, and both him and Linda went to ECU out in Greenville. Then, of course, going up to the Northeast in Connecticut to start WWF at the time, now WWE. And it was back during the time, for those of you that don't know the history of wrestling, I'm going to give you a brief one-on-one. Back before WWE was the only game in town, wrestling was very territorial, where each part of the country had their own territories, and it was an unwritten rule between all of the territories that you would not poach. And if you were to go work another territory, they would either set it up. Yes, wrestling is scripted. They would set it up to where you would drop your belt, or they would write it out to where you would have a leave town match or something like that. But once Vince McMahon came into the game with WWE and saw that I want to take it nationally, then all of the regional territories ended up consolidating and it became WWE. And then, of course, Ted Turner, further down 85 in Atlanta, came up with WCW after, I believe, was Stone Mountain Wrestling or Georgia Wrestling. I think that was the indie promotion that they ended up turning to WCW, which aired on the Superstation. And how Greensboro, the Coliseum especially, played a big part during those early pre-territorial days of professional wrestling.
Yeah, so to clean that up a little bit, Vince McMahon's father, Vince Sr., already had WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, based out of New York in that territory that's there. And so, in the Northeast area. So when Vince was done with college, he went up there to help his dad. And so he saw just different ways that he felt like he could make it better and bigger. And so he bought the company from his dad, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to just make it a big spectacle, and he felt like, we can take this thing past this area. We can do bigger and better. So you're definitely right on that. That's when, when they started doing that, then the Mid-Atlantic, Crockett Promotions, and then also Georgia Championship Wrestling, they started working together a little bit more. And so they almost kind of came together. And so it was Mid-Atlantic and Georgia that kind of became WCW at the time. And, at first, though, they were trying to do the whole NWA, which basically when the NWA was the organization that was basically had one belt or a few belts that would travel between the different territories. So Ric Flair could be in the Mid-Atlantic. One night he could go down to Georgia, go to Florida. Then the next week he could go to, California, whatever. And he was just going to the different territories representing the NWA. So you had a national champion. And so WCW was able to try to get all those other companies to try to, slide in together. And it was supposed to be NWA versus WWF. But that kind of broke off, and then it became WCW. And so that's kind of how things, kind of ended up. But yeah, it's the history of wrestling in North Carolina is definitely very deep. And one of the interesting things, one of the biggest feuds ever, Ric Flair versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, began right there at WRAL in the same studio that I do my sportscast every night. And it's always amazing. It's something I think about. I walk in there and it's like history. It's like I'm about to go in there and do my sportscast. But this is where Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Ric Flair began. And that's one of the, most popular feuds in wrestling history. And so it's always something I feel blessed to be a part of.
Yeah, because on YouTube you can find some old WRL news footage from the late 70s and how they had in one of the commercials a promotion for a match at the Dorton Arena in Raleigh with Flair, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Chief Wahoo Daniels, some of the legends of wrestling that would go on to change the game. And to kind of go off script a little bit, did you catch the last ride, The Undertaker, on WWE Network?
I haven't watched that. No, I've seen like bits and pieces of it, but I haven't watched it. No.
It was so dope because for me growing up, I'm sure you as well, the Undertaker, larger than life figure, and how he was one of those wrestlers that was old school, didn't break character, stayed true to the business, and how he allowed WWE cameras to document the last stretch of his career. Because when I saw him do an interview on Hot Ones, it was weird for me to see him not in character, because he was always in character all the time when he was active.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that definitely carried that old school flag with him for sure. So I've definitely heard a lot of great things about that documentary, but I haven't seen it myself.
Yeah, definitely dope. So what was it like for you when you went down to train for wrestling and then doing the bumps and learning how to properly go off the top rope and all of that good stuff when you were cutting your teeth doing the indie wrestling circuit?
You know, it's crazy. There was a pay-per-view that was in Raleigh. I'd have to start on Sundays, and I did training one Sunday. There's a pay-per-view in Raleigh the next Sunday. So literally, I was doing my second day of training, and me and who's now my wife, but it was my girlfriend at the time, Carissa. We knew that so she decided to come with me. We were going to check into a hotel in Raleigh and then go to the pay-per-view, stay the night in Raleigh, and then go back to High Point the next day. And I was so sore trying to watch that pay-per-view in person. And, my neck was just like all weird and all that. She was trying to massage me. And I was like, oh man, this is so weird. Like my body is just all over the place. But, yeah, man, it was fun, man. Like, wrestling is something that I think was really fun. I'm glad I pulled the trigger and I ended up doing it. I can't describe, the joy I ended up having, doing it because, wrestling is, if you love wrestling and you end up being a part of wrestling, then, actually getting a chance to do it and sharing the locker room with people like Shane Helms, who I did interview in episode 1 and 2, part 2 is coming up this week, or, just other, superstars. It's just amazing to look back and see like, man, like I'm really like next to these people that I end up watching. And, Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man, I ended up tag teaming with him one Thanksgiving night in Asheboro. We were the headliners, and it's like, what, like I remember being a little boy, like 2 years old, 3 years old, my mom talking about Jimmy Valiant, and I get a chance to tag team with this dude on a Thanksgiving night. And so it's just so many different great stories or whatever. Wrestling is one of the funnest times of my life.
Yeah, the Hardy Boys from North Carolina. I believe the late Junkyard Dog was from Fayetteville. So definitely wrestling, very huge in the state. And are you guys for Culture State planning on having any people from NASCAR coming on? Because as we know, NASCAR is very deep within North Carolina with a lot of the teams headquartered in and around the Charlotte area. And of course, the Earnhardts and the Pettys.
Yeah, NASCAR is North Carolina pretty much, but yeah, that's something that we've talked about. They're about to, crank open their season, so we'll try to fit everything in. But we're thinking about the Dillon brothers. They're from Welcome, North Carolina, in Davidson County. Ty Dillon and oh, you might have to edit this part. I just leave in Austin.
Name
Todd. Yeah, Ty Dillon is doing his thing. Austin Dillon drives the number 3 that Dale Earnhardt Sr. Used to drive. Their grandfather, Mr. Childress, like he was big in in NASCAR. Of course, you got the King, Richard Petty from Asheboro. Actually, he's from Randleman, but his home base is right. Randleman is outside of Asheboro, so it's right there in that Randleman, Asheboro area. We've talked about, trying to schedule him, because that would be awesome to talk to the King. I mean, there's so many people that's from North Carolina, and, even if they're not from North Carolina, they live there now. And so, NASCAR is definitely something that's on our radar for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if ESPN can hear this, but I'm letting ESPN know. ESPN, please do a 30 for 30 or something on the Charlotte Hornets. Because the Hornets, when they came onto the scene, they led the league in sellouts for years. And of course, their big 3 was Zoe, Larry Johnson, Muggsy Bogues, Steph Curry, Kendall Gill, Matt Geiger. Then, of course, for those basketball heads that know, the Hornets originally drafted the late, great Kobe Bryant.
Mm-hmm. For sure. The Hornets are a big part. Like, just follow the Culture State podcast. Go ahead and give it 5 stars. Go ahead and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, because a lot of things that you're bringing up are things that Dennis and I have already talked about, or emails that we've already sent. So there's, I don't want to give away too much, but we definitely have some big plans, and there's so many great stories that can come of this, and so we're definitely happy to put this out.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it. And I want to get you out of here on this. Name me your all-time Duke starting 5.
Oh my gosh.
I'm putting you on the spot. All-time Duke starting 5.
You did put me on the spot.
And this is positionless, so they don't have to be the traditional 1 through 5. And then I'll give you my all-time Carolina.
That makes it a little bit easier because I was going to try to figure out like which. I definitely have to put Zion there. I have to put Grant Hill there. I have to put JJ Redick there. And this may not make sense as far as NBA is concerned. But if you look at what he was in college, Shane Battier, he has to be there. Like Shane Battier was like Mr. Everything at Duke. Man, who's the fifth person I'm going to pick? There's so many different names to pick.
Did you say Jay Will? Jay Will, Bobby Hurley, Cherokee Parks, Trajan Langdon.
And that's the tough part because I'm thinking of all those names and it's like I'm going to leave out somebody from the top 5 and it's going to sound crazy, but it's either going to be it's either going to be Jay Will or Christian Laettner. And that's crazy to say, right? Like if you think about it, just like how great they were at Duke, it's like one of those are going to be left off the top 5. I'll just go ahead and say, even though you said positionless, I don't have a point guard there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put Jay Will there. So I guess Christian Laettner is coming off the bench, which is great. That sounds so crazy.
Yeah, and Jay Will's doing this thing with KJ and Z on ESPN with Ahmad Zubin and Keyshawn Johnson. Now, my all-time starting 5 Tar Heels positionless, I go MJ, Vince, Rasheed, Jerry, and Ed Cota.
You know what? You got to get an iPhone because on Clubhouse, there's a video, or not a video, a room that my man B Dot started, and it's called the Heels House on Clubhouse. And so before halftime and post game of every UNC Tar Heel game, my man B Dot will host this house. It's a discussion, and he always has former Tar Heels in the house. So Kenny Williams, Brandon Robinson, Jawad Williams, Shamond Williams. There's names I'm forgetting. Rayshawn Terry. There's all kinds of names that end up coming in there, and they end up coming in there and they talk about like, hey, this is what's happening with the team. This is what coach is saying to him at halftime. This is what's going on. This is why this person doesn't look as good because in our system, we're supposed to do this and they're not understanding this. And their skill set is tailored towards, this or whatever. And it's very insightful, man. It's very, very insightful. And just even, just where I'm at, like I love listening to them talk basketball and all that. So it's
all those shots.
You got to get on it. I think
all those shots that us Droid users, you don't know, Clubhouse invite only for iPhone users. Curse you, Apple, and your exclusivity. And your thoughts on The Last Dance and MJ, because I was surprised that he even agreed to do it because he rarely does interviews and how open and candid he was.
Yeah, but knowing Jordan though, like, I don't know Jordan, but knowing what I know about Jordan, he is going to do an interview. He's not above interviews. He's just going to do it the right time. And for Jordan basically to shut down the world because at the perfect time when, the pandemic started, just so people could talk about him is very Jordan-esque if you think about it. But no, I love The Last Ride. It was amazing to see, and it gave you that insight into who he was, off of the basketball court and his motivations for retiring both times and really all 3 times. I think you understood him a little bit more, and I love it. And it also gave you a glimpse into what made him special as a person and as a player. And so, I absolutely love it. That is, I think if I were able to get an interview with Jordan for that podcast, my God,
you'll break the internet with that one, bro. If you can get his area,
it would shut it down. Like I think that's what me and Dennis like, no, like, all right, this isn't going to happen, but it could happen. And so we're going to go for it. So we never say never. So that is, that's ultimately, That's what I want to do. I want to get Jordan on the podcast, and that's going to be like a 4-parter.
Yeah,
I tell you.
nothing beats a failure but a try, and it all started at Laney down in Wilmington. And then real quickly, like I said, Stranger Things, biggest thing on Netflix, and then the Duffer Brothers from North Carolina. I believe they went to Jordan High School, and Stranger Things, one of the biggest things on Netflix. So we're definitely looking forward to that when the new season drops. So do you have any shout outs you want to give before we wrap, plug social, and also where they can find Culture State?
Yeah, Culture State at Culture State Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me at Chris Lee TV, Twitter and Instagram. My last name is Lea, of course. You can follow my man Dennis Cox, who's my co-host, at The Fan Rookie on Instagram and Twitter. So everything is good there. Shout outs to you, J Mace, for the platform, and continue to do your thing. And shout outs to the state of North Carolina. We're just going to make this thing big.
Yeah, we're putting on for the Tar Heel State. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream your podcast, and also on my YouTube channel, Beyond the Album Cover, the same name. Be sure to subscribe to the Facebook group, facebook.com/Beyond the Album Cover, to get updated with all things show related. And thank you to everyone for making Beyond the Album Cover a success. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. My good friend, brother from another mother, Chris Lee, aka the artist formerly known as Show Smooth. Thank you for coming on to Beyond the Album Cover, bro.
Yes, sir. We need that 5 stars, and every pot, like, get Spotify 5 stars, get Apple 5 stars, everything. We need 5 stars.
Take that.